talk about what they do, what their job is like for about 5 or 6 minutes. So should we start with Sophie for our AI industry?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Super. I'll try and live up to both the lightning side of the pitch, and also there was something in there about amazing speeches. So no pressure. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fantastic, super. So hi everyone. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who's come along. Hopefully we can give you some useful information throughout this session. I've just put my bio in again on this first slide to let you know a little bit about who I am as the top level. So I'm a clinical product manager and I work at a health tech company called Human Therapeutics. The name's a little bit misleading. We don't actually make any therapeutics. It's mostly to do with understanding patients' health and helping them to manage that. What I do is I create sort of digital solutions for remotely managing health. And ideally, we implement, ideally we implement AI in those solutions as well, where appropriate. I'm really focused on generating evidence and working with users to understand how they're receiving our products. And I'm really interested in mental wellness, brain health, women's health in particular, and very much diversity is important in my work. That's my day job. In my evenings and weekends, I lead the London chapter of Neurotech X. If anyone out there is interested in neurotechnology, so that's cool tech you can use to do fun things with the brain. That might be helping people with paralysis, or it might be controlling a light bulb in your room. It's HealthTech and it's outside of HealthTech. Do definitely check out Neurotech X. We're just in the process of setting up a student club, and you can see our Twitter there at the bottom, so give us a follow. So let me tell you a little bit about my company, Human Therapeutics. So we're a London-based health tech startup. We're about 150 people, and we specialize in two main areas. So the first area is remote patient monitoring, and that's basically creating digital solutions that allow patients as well as their doctors to better understand and manage their health. So our main product is actually a smartphone app that connects to a web-based portal where patients can submit information and then their doctors can review it. And if they need to be pulled into hospital or need a further assessment, they're able to do that in a really targeted way. And this is really valuable because it means that patients don't need to come into the hospital to be seen, to be assessed. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that's been super valuable during COVID. But also, if you're able to capture information once a week, once a day, really often, then you actually get a much better understanding of how the patient is doing versus if they come into hospital sort of once every 6 months. The other thing that we do is sort of predictive and proactive care. And we have some amazing AI engineers who work at our company, and they work with really big data sets to basically build models that can predict in advance when a clinical event is going to happen. Clinical event here basically means, well, pretty much anything. It could be an asthma attack, it could be developing Alzheimer's disease, it could be having a heart attack, really anything. And the reason this is really valuable is if you can pick up that something's going to happen, you can intervene before it does happen and make sure the patient gets the support that they need. So that's what my company does. I'll tell you a little bit about what I do specifically. So I'm a product manager. I'd actually never heard of the concept of a product manager before I kind of left university and started working. But basically what it means is working with experts and pulling together information to understand, these products we're building in healthcare, what do they actually need to look like? And so I spend a lot of time working alongside lots of different experts and learning lots of things to make sure I'm building these products appropriately. So let me give you an example. So I spend a lot of time researching the medical literature and working with doctors who are really experienced in particular healthcare areas to make sure that my products have what we would call clinical relevance. What I mean by this is if I was building an app to understand if someone had Alzheimer's disease, if that app was basically just a question that said, what's your favorite animal? It probably won't have clinical relevance. I would want to use a sort of memory test, maybe something to do with motor function, mood assessment, things like that. I also spend a lot of time speaking with patients, people who actually use these apps, to understand for them, what does this need to look like to get you to use it? A lot of digital products nowadays are super stylish and hyper minimalist, but actually for clinical products, what's important is just that it's really simple and easy to use and doesn't take too long to use. A big part of my work is also regulatory issues. And if you're thinking of working in health tech, this is likely something that you'll touch on in some capacity. So I have to have a good understanding of laws and regulations around building the products that we build so that we make sure that we're building something that's safe ultimately. So alongside colleagues I have who are really experts in this area, we ask ourselves questions like, what happens if this app goes wrong? What if it stops working? What if it malfunctions? And what can we build into it so that even if something does go wrong, no harm actually comes to the patient? I also spent a lot of time working with tech people to understand technical requirements around the products that we build. The main question here is it realistic? So sometimes we work with what we call wearables. So if you have, for example, an Apple Watch that can measure your heart rate, we can capture that information and that can be submitted to your doctor as well. But often we'll try to just use the phone because not everyone has an Apple Watch. And actually there's only so much health information you can capture via a smartphone. So I couldn't ask my developers to build something that did a brain scan, for example. The technology just isn't there. The same goes for machine learning. Taking that example from earlier, no matter how talented the machine learning engineer, if I ask them to build an AI model that can predict Alzheimer's risk from your favorite animal, it's probably just not possible at all. And then the final thing is business requirements. So I need to make sure that the products that I build have what we call product market fit. It's basically a fancy way of saying, is there a spot on the market where this product can go? So for example, if I think I want to build something and another company has already built an excellent version of that particular product, or actually what I want to build doesn't solve a real world issue and nobody's going to want to buy it, then it would be a bad business decision for us to go ahead and build it. So a lot of my work is speaking with all of these experts to understand these requirements and pull them together into something that kind of meets all of the requirements and is a compromise without compromising too much on any one particular area. So just before I go, I wanted to let you guys know briefly about some big themes that come up, at least in my day-to-day work, and some things that you might want to think about if you're interested in working in health tech. So evidence generation is a huge part of working in health tech, making sure that you know yourself, but you can also demonstrate to other people that your products are doing what you're saying they're doing and what they need to be doing. So I spend a lot of time designing and conducting research studies and analyzing data to demonstrate my products are easy to use, they're clinically accurate, and maybe even that they can save healthcare systems money or help patients be healthier. Something else that's really important is user-centric design. So in the UK, quite a lot of the time, healthcare, the way these products are sold, the person who's making the decision to buy the product isn't necessarily the person who will use it. So for example, for us, the NHS is a really big client of ours, and they might come to us and say, can you make us an app so we can monitor our COVID patients and keep them away from the clinic? And so what's easy to do, and what a lot of health tech companies do, is they focus on building something that's appropriate for the NHS, and the NHS are really happy. But they lose focus on the fact that the patient needs to be happy, because if the patient's not happy with the way the product works, they're not going to use it. And if they don't actually use it, then it can't support them to manage their health. Another thing that's really important is thinking about what you're interested in and the problems you want to solve and the patients that you want to help. Healthcare is an immeasurably huge industry, and there are so many different companies doing different things, so it's important to think about what matters to you. For me, I'm really interested in mental health. We've seen during the pandemic how important that is, and how for many people it's not there and it's still quite a taboo topic. So it's certainly something that is really important to address in my perspective. I also think that women's health is a really important issue. It's certainly something that it's not a secret that clinical science has largely not paid attention to women in the way that they could have done. And so there's a huge scope at the moment to create health tech products to really support women with their specific health issues. And finally, I wanted to touch on diversity. And I know this is something that's really big for One HealthTech. Diversity is important for many, many issues, and for many reasons, and particularly for me working in AI. So there are many AI models that are very vulnerable to bias for a number of different reasons. It could be that the data set used to build the model is very homogeneous, or it could be just that AI, in the way it's developed, isn't able to take on board nuances in terms of how we understand the health of people from different backgrounds. So it's really important to be aware of this and to know that when we build these models, they might not be able to serve people from underrepresented backgrounds in the same way as other people. What's also really important is diversity in the people who are building these products. And this isn't only because we need to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to work on these really fascinating issues at these amazing companies, but to build products that work for people from all different backgrounds, we need to bring on board people from all different backgrounds so they can share their perspectives. So hopefully that was within, I think, 5 to 7 minutes was the brief. So let me see if I can stop sharing my screen briefly and hand over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Sophie. I think that was within time, and it was really succinct. So yeah, should we move on to data and politics, policy? Aidan, do you want to screen share or?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'll see if I've got a couple of slides I can share. I was going to go with like hastily written notes, but actually I've got some slides which would be much nicer. So let's see if I can find the right window. Hopefully you can all see that okay.
Yeah.
Big and Blue says ethical health tech. Fantastic. Hi, everybody. And thanks so much to the One HealthTech gang for having me here. Really nice to be able to speak to you all. So my name is Aidan Pepin. I'm a senior researcher for public engagement at the Ada Lovelace Institute, and I've been given the daunting task of talking about ethics and policy, which are two big, huge, nebulous grey words. And just to kind of speak a little bit about who the Ada Lovelace Institute are, because that's probably the best way into talking about what ethics and policy are in this space. So who are Ada Lovelace Institute? Well, we're an independent research institute, deliberative body with a mission to ensure data and AI work for people and society, which is our very professional kind of jargon-filled way of saying we're basically a bunch of researchers that are interested in questions like, what does responsible COVID tech look like? What does kind of public opinion on facial recognition look like, and how does that affect the way that it's developed and designed and deployed? And what does fair access and use of NHS data look like? And so we kind of are a ragtag bunch of social scientists, policy professionals, data scientists, people who've come from a technical background, so people who've worked at places like Twitter or Google. We've got people who come from a legal background, from a philosophy background. For some reason, they let me work there. And basically, we try to address all kinds of issues that surround exactly what Sophie was just saying around the kind of governance and regulation that surrounds some technologies. So just to kind of say a little bit more about why we exist. The Ada Lovelace Institute was formed in 2018. We were founded by the Nuffield Foundation, which is an organization that funds all kinds of social research. And they set us up with this remit to look at the kind of issues that were to do with data and technology that were affecting society. And we don't just look at health tech, we look at environment, we look at finance, we look at, I just said environment, we look at finance, we look at other sectors as well. So things like policing, so facial recognition is a really good one area that we're working on as well. And all the work that we do is to try and look at what are some of the ethical questions which underpin how these technologies pervade society. And one of the things that people often ask is, what do we mean by ethics? And when you're looking at health tech, what you're often taught, or not just health tech, but any technology and AI, you often kind of find yourself talking about the trolley problem, which for me is not what we should be talking about, but it's what you hear at many, many conferences about AI. It's this idea that this philosophical thought experiment where you have a carriage running down a track and it's going to collide with 5 people, but you're stood by a lever, and if you were to pull the lever, it would only collide with 1 person. And the question is, do you pull the lever? It's this really nice kind of neat philosophical thought experiment that people can say, well, there are all sorts of reasons why you should or shouldn't pull the lever. And this kind of thought experiment is applied to all kinds of technologies, most commonly things like self-driving cars. But for me, this isn't what we really are talking about with ethics, because the reality is that this problem is hypothetical, and what we're really interested in are where the rubber hits the road and where AI and other health technologies are being applied in the real world and what that means. So for us, for me, there's a definition around AI ethics, which is a set of values, principles, and techniques that employ widely accepted standards of right and wrong to guide moral conduct in the development and use of AI technologies. And for me, this is a really helpful way of thinking about what it is when we talk about ethics of any technology, but in particular data and AI. So this question of what are the values and principles really gets at the heart of when we're using technologies which have really important outcomes on people's lives. So if you're designing an algorithm, say, which is going to help diagnose particular medical conditions, that's going to have a huge impact on people's health and people's care. What are the values you're putting into that? What are the principles you're using to design that? Because if you're instilling a value that actually you want the most economically efficient solution to be prioritized by that algorithm, well, that might supersede other priorities like actually making sure people have the best health outcome. But in a real world, you can't always say, well, we're only going to focus on the best health outcome without thinking about what the economic consequences of that may be. And so hashing out these really tricky questions of values and principles is very much the heart of what we do at the Ada Lovelace Institute to try and work out what right and wrong looks like when you're deploying health technologies. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my slides there because that's the last useful one, but I'll just say a little bit more about the kind of work that we do and how our team works. So as I mentioned before, we're kind of an interdisciplinary bunch, and I say that because I think when you're interested in these kinds of questions and you want to know what it is to work in the sort of policy, ethics, AI space, I think sometimes it can be quite tricky to understand what does that actually look like? What does that work actually, involve? And so for us, we're a team of about a dozen or so people. We're hopefully going to grow to something like 15 or 16 later this year. And I think we reflect a number of organizations like think tanks, like research institutes, like some academic departments, like organizations that sit quite close to government, like the Center for Data Ethics and Innovation. These are organizations which contain a mix of people that come from a range of disciplinary backgrounds, whether they're really kind of scientific backgrounds and have done hard sciences like biology or physics or whatever it may be, through to the people that have done social sciences like political science or social science, or sociology, anthropology, and then people who've studied humanities as well. So I have a weird interdisciplinary background where I once started doing an engineering degree, which didn't agree with me. I then went off and studied drama, which was very much like doing English literature, but with more of a focus on theatre. Then I did sociology and really discovered qualitative research. Found myself working at a health tech organization called the Wellcome Trust. I'm sorry, not a health tech, but a health organization called the Wellcome Trust, where they do a whole range of things, looking at culture and society and science and health, and then found myself in this world of policy. So there's no one way into policy. It requires a range of skills and backgrounds. And what I love about the Ada Lovelace Institute is that's really reflected in the fact that we have all these different skills and perspectives in the team and different roles as well. So I'm a researcher, but my colleagues are, we have people who do comms and project management, people who do data analysis, people who do design and make our reports look really snazzy and really impactful. So I think the kind of one key takeaway from my rambling about what ethics and policy is that it's a really broad field that's really trying to get at the heart of how do we design and deploy technologies and regulate them and govern them in the way that is the most beneficial for society. And doing that work requires a whole bunch of skills and perspectives and has many roots in. But if you have a particular field that you're interested in within kind of health tech, there's almost always a niche within the policy world that you can probably apply that to. So I'll wrap up there and say thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Aidan. That was really informative. So should we move on to data and informatics? Rohini, do you want to share screen?
Great, thank you, Sarah. How's that for everybody?
Yep, I can see.
Perfect. So my name is Rohini and I am an academic. I'm an epidemiologist based at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the Electronic Health Records group. And thank you all for having me today. So in the London School, there are a number of research teams, and in the Electronic Health Records group, we are a team of epidemiologists that work on a range of scientific questions, and we're all really bound together by our commonality in our use of big data in developing statistical and epidemiological methods for the best use of these data to answer a range of clinical questions. And so just a bit about my background. I studied in Canada with an undergraduate degree in health studies, and I actually came to the UK to the London School to do a master's in reproductive health, which then led me to my first research assistant job at McGill. And I moved into working with electronic health records as a research fellow at Queen Mary University. And this is what led me through to my PhD, looking at how to make the best use of routine clinical data to examine ethnic inequalities, which is what I work on now. And so something I'd like to talk to you about today is a project called Open Safely, which was developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the question around this time last year was actually in the context of a national emergency. Can we create a new highly secure safe data platform for EHR research very quickly? So traditionally with electronic health records research, what happens often is that you apply to access the data, and then the data is sent to you in some kind of text format or some downloadable CSV. And this can take a few months for this all to come through. And so what happened was that the Open Safely team, we decided that we would take the analysis to the data. So what that means is that instead of us having the data locally to work with, we would write our scripts ourselves and then send the data to the healthcare providers that hold the data to do the analysis on their own secure systems. So the Open Safely Collaborative is a collaboration between the Oxford Data Lab and the LSHTM Electronic Health Records Group, along with software providers TPP, who are a primary care data provider. And we are a mixed team. So in the London School side, we are largely epidemiologists, but on the Oxford side, there are a range of people who are software developers, clinician epidemiologists, and we've all worked together to put this together very rapidly. And we had our first scientific output in 42 days from conception to production. And this was a paper looking at factors associated with COVID-19 related death using Open Safely. And so just a bit about how we work. We've got several levels of data protection, and this was really important to ensure that the data, are held as securely as possible. So at level 1, that's where the actual clinical data lives. So these are the data that as your GP enters them, the system that they live on is level 1. So this is the TPP server. Then these data are then de-identified to an event level database. So these are the research ready data. So we don't see anything about people's names, addresses, their NHS number, where they live, but we do have a unique identifier for pseudonymization. And then finally, there's level 3, which is the anonymized aggregate tables for epidemiological research. So these are the kinds of data that people like myself would be using. So you could have data on a range of exposures and outcomes, but we would never, these would never be linked back to the identifiable data. And so we've got our software developer and epidemiologists who have access to the higher levels, and then end users at the lower level. And so the nice thing about Open Safely is currently the largest primary care database being used for this kind of research. It includes 40% of all general practices in the UK, which is currently around 24 million people. And we are able to look at a range of factors from socio-demographic characteristics to people's medical history, a range of COVID-19 related outcomes. And in doing this work, we've all upskilled in a range of programming languages. So I myself only really use Stata before coming to this work, but working alongside the software developers, we use a combination of Python, R, Stata, and YAML programming to make all of our science work together. So a bit more about the work that I have been leading in Open Safely. So as I mentioned, my background and training has been largely around using electronic health records for ethnic inequalities. So I've been leading a stream of research on ethnic inequalities in COVID-19, which was, really led very early on from these early data in the pandemic about these stark differences in mortality in certain ethnic minority groups, both in the UK and internationally. And so using the data of 17 million adults, we looked at a range of outcomes. So we looked at whether there were ethnic differences in whether people tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, whether they were admitted to hospital, whether they were admitted to ICU, and whether they experienced a COVID-19 death. And these plots here are just some of the results, which show that any number above 1 being indicating increased risk. And we saw that across all ethnic minority groups in relation to white groups, there were higher risks of all these outcomes. And so this was a really, I think, important finding kind of at the midpoint of the pandemic, and really made us think about what are the mechanisms which drive these inequalities. Is it because of increased exposure, because of people's occupations or the kinds of communities they live in, if they live in dense kind of urban areas? So this really has generated a lot of hypotheses for other researchers to take forward. So that's a bit about the work that I've done, but the team at Open Safely work on a range of topics. So we've done a lot of studies looking at pharmacoepidemiology, so the use of different drugs for the prevention or treatment of COVID-19. We also create a weekly vaccination database. So this is updated every week to show vaccination uptake across the country. And the work that we've done has found a lot of exposure outside of traditional academic routes. So our findings contribute to reports for SAGE. They've been reported in the news, and as well as the traditional papers, as you can see here. So I just wanted to end with saying that work in the electronic health groups covers a range of areas, and we have master's students and PhD students that work with us in these areas, but many others, including methodology. So if you are considering a career in health tech, this can also overlap very nicely with academia and research as well. So there are many opportunities, and this is a growing group at the school, and we look forward to hearing from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohini. That was really informative. Shall we move on to health IT infrastructure? Aisha, do you want to take over?
Yeah, I don't have slides, so I'm just going to be talking to you directly, so you have to put it with my face, unfortunately, for a few minutes. So, as I said, my name is Aisha Rahim. I'm a consultant psychiatrist by background. I work in an NHS organisation, which is a mental health trust in Lancashire and South Cumbria. So I'm possibly the least technical person on this call, but that is not a barrier to a career in health tech. So in terms of what I do, my job is split into various parts. So I still see patients. I'm a perinatal psychiatrist. I look after the mental health of women in pregnancy in and around that time of their lives. And I do that 1 day a week. The rest of my time is spent as a senior medical manager. So I'm the deputy medical director of my organisation. But the reason I'm talking to you today is about my technical role. So I am a CCIO, which is a Chief Clinical Information Officer. So that is essentially the clinical lead for technology in the organisation. So what I'm going to be talking to you about mainly is around the NHS and digital in relation to the NHS structure and services. And I can speak a little bit about some of the other roles as well, but the bit that I know most about is being a clinician working in that space. Now, when we think of the NHS, most people think about the nurses and doctors, but of course, what we don't see, what we don't celebrate as often is all the massive infrastructure that underpins a smooth running of the delivery of clinical care. And that includes, of course, our digital colleagues, our technical colleagues. So whilst nurses and doctors tend to get all of the glory, we would absolutely grind to a halt if it wasn't for all the supporting services that help us to do the jobs that we do in terms of delivering that care. And digital is a key part of that as well. So just a little bit, I suppose, about my background. I never planned on becoming somebody that's working in digital health. I trained as a doctor. My intention was to practice as a doctor. And then just about 3 or 4 years ago, I found myself almost by accident working in this space. But I absolutely thrive and I love this job, and I'd encourage anybody that's working as a clinician or has interest in clinical sides of things to get involved and take an interest in digital. So as I said, I'll tell you a little bit about my actual role as a clinician working in health tech, but I'll say a little bit about some of the other roles that I interface with in the digital directorate that I work in as well. So in terms of my day-to-day role as a CCIO, I get involved in such a variety of things, which is one of the joys, I suppose, of working in this role. So on one level, I lead major digital transformation projects. So the best example of that that I can tell you is about the deployment of our electronic patient records. Now, my organisation's had an electronic patient record for about 15, 16 years, but we've recently moved to a different product. So my role within that has been to help lead that transformation from a clinical perspective. So in the brass tacks of what I do is getting involved, speaking with our clinicians, our end users, our admin staff who aren't technical at all necessarily, but of course we'll be using these systems day in, day out. So my job is to ensure that the system that we create together is fit for purpose so that people can do their jobs with as little friction as possible. So I will hold workshops, I'll run those meetings to inform the development, the technical development of what that system should look like, how it should be configured. So I do that kind of stuff. So the engagement piece with clinical staff is the bit that I am particularly versed in, I suppose, being a clinician, an active clinician myself. But the other thing that we do, and this is touched on by Sophie, I think, some of the other projects that I'm involved with in terms of digital transformation are patient facing. So an example of that would be a patient portal, for example. So my role would also there be to engage with patients and holding patient workshops, so that we co-produce the development of a product in the end. So that might be from procurement. So we've got a range of different options open to us about what product will meet our need that we've identified. So we would absolutely involve our patients within that, get their opinions, help them, empower them to help us build it together. So that patient contact is something that I would also lead on. Another really important aspect, again, which you may have heard talked about already, is the clinical safety side of things. So there is managing clinical risk as part of my day-to-day clinical job, but actually the technology that we implement, the products that we implement will also have an impact on clinical safety. So again, my job is to ensure that whatever we do, although we can't eliminate clinical risk, we can certainly mitigate those things. So I would coordinate that to make sure that we are following all the guidance, all the legislation around the assurance of clinical safety of digital projects. But beyond that, as a CCIO, one of the other jobs that I have is to engage in strategic digital work. So I will often spend time with my board members, my executive board members, my non-exec board members, who aren't necessarily particularly digitally literate themselves, I suppose. So being able to communicate to them why I think we should be doing a certain thing or going in a certain direction, helping to write our digital strategy is something that I'd also be certainly co-producing with my director of digital. So one of the key skills as a clinician working in this space is around communication. So it's actually not the technical side of things. So I need to know enough technical knowledge to know when I'm trying to say this without swearing, to know when the wool is being pulled over my eyes, because you can be blinded by technical language. I need to know just enough to know when that's happening. But the major part of what I'm doing is to ensure that we have a reason for doing why we're doing, because it's no good shoehorning a technical solution to solve a problem that doesn't exist. You start with the problem. What's the clinical need? What is the solution that meets that need? And in the course of doing that, I have to communicate with a variety of stakeholders. So my chief finance officer, having a conversation with her might be about the same project, but the way I describe that and discuss that will be very different to how I discuss that same project with a support worker working on our wards who needs to understand, and I need to understand their point of view as well. But the language that you use, the way you frame that conversation will be different depending on who in your organisation you're speaking to. And that's why communication skills are a key part of the skill set of a CCIO. And that kind of leads on to general comms as well. So when we're doing public engagement, media work, I suppose, a CCIO can be a really good bridge between the clinical side of things and the technical side of things. So I see that role as being one of being something that's a bridge, being multilingual, so speaking the language of an executive director in a way that speaks to them, speaking the language of a clinician so that they get things and understand why we're trying to do what we're doing. So if you are interested in hearing more about other careers within the NHS, we interface, of course, with technical colleagues. So I can say a little bit about that. We work really closely with our business intelligence and our data science colleagues as well, which is going to be a real growth area, I think, within the NHS. So if that's a career that you're interested in, that's a really good place to start. But also project management as well. And our project managers are really, really key partners in making sure that we deliver products that are fit for purpose, that create value for our taxpayers as well. So I hope that's been helpful, and looking forward to seeing some of you in the breakout room.
Thank you, Aisha. That was really useful and informative. Should we move to Jared now for devices and diagnostics?
Brilliant, thank you. It's actually great to be here, and I'm learning about new skills and new roles in healthcare as well. So it's no, thank you to all the earlier speakers. And I noticed on chat we've got somebody in Bangladesh and Gambia and Nigeria as well. So we're going global, I think, with this event. So welcome to you as well. And when I'm kind of looking actually at the future of HealthTech, so thanks to everyone who's actually joined up and is attending this evening's event. And I work at Roche Diagnostics, so we're a big global diagnostics company. So I work in industry. And you know, I've got to say, it's also, it sounds silly. It's great to be talking live, because I've joined a couple of events recently where I've had to do my pre-recorded speech and send it in, but I still join the event. So I'm watching myself talking, but I'm not allowed to talk. I'm not allowed to say hello to anybody because I'm already talking. So it's great for One HealthTech, typical One HealthTech style, to have as a kind of a live event where everyone can talk. So yeah, no, it's great to be here. And so really just a kind of just a couple of minutes about diagnostics and devices. And we all know what diagnostics are because every media channel for the last year has been talking about testing. So in vitro diagnostic testing or diagnostics. So we've seen it everywhere. It's been a really, really important kind of tool in the battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also kind of know it, from going to our GP, because often there comes a time when we say to our GP or a doctor, please, can I just have the MRI scan, or can you just arrange a blood test or a tissue test? And what happens when the GP arranges the test? They know exactly what's wrong. You're like, yes, and then they're actually able to help you. So diagnostics is really, really important. And the industry that I work in is in vitro diagnostics, and it drives about 70% of clinical decision making, which means the technology has a big impact, but you have a big impact working in the industry because it helps clinicians to determine or to detect, cancer, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and a whole host of other conditions. So it's a really amazing industry to work in and to make, to be able to make an impact on people's lives. And there's just, I head up innovation in the UK and Ireland. I think I've got the best job in the world, there's just so much innovation happening right now in the area of diagnostics. And I think it's, it's always been really, really important, but I think, COVID-19 has really shone a light on how important diagnostic testing is, really to protect the health of a nation, but also to protect the economy of a nation as well. So I think that's become very real for us recently. And so in terms of innovation, and I'm so happy I'm talking now because all of the other speakers have kind of touched on some of these things, but you've got billions and billions of data points from diagnostic tests, and organizations are now starting to look at AI algorithms, electronic patient health records in order to be able to kind of provide earlier detection. So imagine if we're actually able to detect cancer earlier and cardiovascular diseases earlier and Alzheimer's earlier. Imagine the impact we can have on people's lives. So it's amazing all of the innovation that's taking place. And then when we move outside the lab, and Sophie kind of touched on this as well at the start, you got digital devices, you got wearables, shrinkage of devices, smartphones, computing power. You've got so much innovation happening in that space that it's generating more and more data, and it's enabling us to really help people manage chronic conditions, but also potentially more and more in the future being able to predict illness as well. So I really think it's an amazing sector to work in, just in terms of really being able to make an impact on people's lives. And in terms of career paths, it's just, there's so many. I'm going to leave stuff out, but there's just so many, right? So you got R&D, you got engineering, you got software and AI and data analytics, user interaction, obviously as well. The more digital things we're doing, we need to be able to, people need to be able to use it. So user interaction, clinical evidence generation, and again, it's not enough just to have the technology. You need the health economic modeling, you need the access. So there's so many different career paths that you can move in the area of diagnostics and devices. And the grads that we kind of, they typically come from, but if I don't say what you're studying, don't feel that, you can't get into diagnostics and devices, because you can. But it's typically, biomedical science, biochemistry, neuro, biology, applied sciences, chemistry, data analytics, AI, engineering, software, economics, business. And I hope they're here. So I've actually invited Alex and Kelsey, who joined Roche Diagnostics a few months ago. So I hope they're here, and they're going to join me. Otherwise, if they're here, I'll buy them a coffee next time I see them in the office. But they'll join me in the breakout room, so you can actually talk to two grads, and you can fire the really difficult questions at them, because they'll be able to answer those difficult questions. If you're kind of looking for more kind of information, so look at the big companies. Look at Roche as a big, biggest biotech company in the world, biggest diagnostics company. There's a lot of information on our kind of career sites. What else would I say about that? I've got some videos as well. So they're more kind of UK centric, but if you join and this isn't like, with the sweeties, come join the diagnostics breakout group and you'll get the links. We'll make sure that everyone kind of gets these links. But they're really good videos about our apprenticeship programs and different kind of grad programs as well. So I think, Royal College of Pathology's RC Path, a good organization in the UK. If you're thinking, I'd like to kind of find out a bit more about it. IBMS, so Institute of Biomedical Sciences, ABHI, the Association of British Health Tech, Tech UK, I think from an AI kind of a perspective as well. And somebody, maybe Maxine or Claire or somebody, can kind of maybe chip in later on or even now, because I think, there's an amazing conference next month in the UK. Well, I say it's in the UK, it's virtual. I mean, does it even make any sense to say it's somewhere? It's virtual, and it's Digital Health Rewired. And I have a feeling that One HealthTech, maybe you got a deal going in as a student to Digital Health Rewired, but it's in March for a week. And I think it'd be, it's a really kind of a good conference to join and see parts of that. And kind of career advice. And this is really weird. So sometimes I talk to grads and they're like, oh, we're really kind of worried about kind of joining industry or leaving university and working. And I thought, has Hollywood kind of painted a really bad picture of, hierarchy and bad bosses and stuff like that? Because I mean, working in industry is just, and working anywhere in health tech is brilliant, but my whole career has been in industry and I love it. Flat management structures, highly collaborative people, real encouragement to experiment, for everyone to lead, to make a difference. So it's, start working. It's amazing. It's an incredible thing to do. And the only other bit of advice I'd really give you is, change your roles every couple of years. I mean, you saw from my kind of bio, I'm technically I'm a late bloomer. It took me 27 years to discover health tech, and I'm so glad I kind of discovered it. But change roles, every couple of years. You might stay in health tech, but we've already heard of so many different roles that there are. So keep moving around, keep learning. It's just an amazing sector. I'm just truly I'm going to stop now because I'm just going to keep on nodding my head and saying how happy I am to work in healthcare. But it's true. I mean, it's an incredible sector to work in, to make a difference and feel challenged. And so that's it for me. And I'll find out in a few minutes whether I'll be buying Alex and Kelsey a cup of coffee next time I see them.
Yeah, I think Alex is in the.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm sure the students will look forward to hearing about their graduate experiences in the breakout room. Okay, then. Last but not least, should we end with Jenny in telehealth?
Yes. Hi. I will share my screen if I can figure out how. So I don't have too many slides, just a few things to kind of allow myself to kind of follow my talking points. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Great. So hi everyone. I'm Jenny. I work as a product designer, a digital product designer in health tech. Primarily worked in a lot of startups, and I will just kind of quickly give you a run through of my previous projects and also kind of what those day-to-days might entail. So one of the projects I worked on was elderly home care, and where we kind of try to digitize helping carers to go to patients in their homes, and being able to take notes more efficiently, having a better way of communicating with the patient's family, and also allowing the agencies to kind of keep better track of their data and the records, essentially to kind of try to bring consistency into their service. I've also worked in diabetes management, and actually, Jerry, I don't know if you know our path or Second Nature in the UK, because we actually partner with Roche for a bit in the UK. So there I worked on kind of creating a internet cognitive behavior therapy for patients with either pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes conditions, and where we helped them a lifestyle, develop healthier habits, and create better relationship with food through a cognitive program, and that is done digitally, and then they can access through the smartphone or the web. And then there, I worked a lot with patients that have diabetes, trying to understand their motivation, their challenges, and how we can kind of create a better experience, a better patient experience for them, and try to not only just manage their disease, but also just in general try to improve their lifestyle. And then there, we also work very closely with dietitians to try to create and to try to design platform for them to easily monitor the patient's progress, to engage with them, whether it's through chat or other or to share resources and so on. And then currently work as a design lead at a telehealth company where we work a lot with primary care. So in the UK and France, we're known as Livy. We're a Swedish company. So in the Nordics and Germany, we're known as Kry. So I don't know if you might have heard of us. And there, I work mainly on the clinician side. What that means is, as a company, we provide primary care to patients. For the most part, we do GP consultations and digitally via an app. In more mature markets, such as in Sweden, which is our HQ, we also provide services such as like prescription, mental health support through psychology consultations. And we also have pregnancy trackers and access to midwives and so on. And a better part of our focus is around trying to connect or create this seamless journey between your digital health and through to your physical health, because obviously there are limitations with telehealth, and you can't solve everything remotely. So how can we make sure that the patient's experience going from things from smaller health issues that you can be treated digitally to bigger health issues that needs to be treated physically, and what does that transition look like? My kind of actual day-to-day working at my current company, I work on the clinician side. So what that means is I don't work with patients. I work with clinicians to help build tools for them to basically provide better quality care for the patients. And that includes obviously providing a great video platform where they can talk to patients or talk to patients face to face over video or on the phone, as well as creating, as well as helping to design electronic health records that complies with the different legal requirements in different markets, because we're alive in a few markets, and it's obviously trying to create a global platform can be challenging in the phone way. But what that means is as a product designer in this space, you would do a lot of research. So it's not only really about kind of creating pretty things or designing the UI of the interface, but a lot of that is also research and understanding our users. So in this case, our clinicians, as well as medical support staff and other administrative staff that will use our platforms, such as receptionists and so on, and then understanding their behaviors, what are their daily kind of responsibilities, and how can we make sure that we provide the tools that to help them do their job. And then, of course, kind of the most important part of my role is around the user experience, to make sure that I don't come from a clinical background, so I don't have any medical knowledge in a sense that I haven't studied about it in university and in other sense, but working with the clinicians to kind of learn a bit more about what their clinical tasks might look like and how we can simplify that as much as possible, and of course at the same time still ensuring that the data that they're working with is safe and that is kind of easy to work with, and the privacy of the patient is taken into account, etc. Yeah, and that's kind of everything I have to say. Of course, working as a designer in the telehealth or a primary telehealth where we provide primary care, you also work with quite a lot of different people as well. I mean, I work with the clinicians, with the GPs on day-to-day basis, but I also work with a lot of software developers, a lot of data scientists, and we also have in-house data science team where they do a lot of machine learning, and then how can you kind of work with that data, and how can you kind of translate that data into something that is simple and easy to understand for the clinicians, and obviously kind of that they can take that information and translate that into providing quality care for the patients. Yeah, I think that's everything I have to say, and I will figure out how I can stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you, Jenny. So I think that's all the speakers. That was a lot of information, very overwhelming, but very educational at the same time. So now it's like an opportunity for you guys to ask some questions, more specific ones if you have any, and about like how you can actually practically get into the industries they're working in. So I'll hand over to Alice to talk about more of the details about it.
Yeah, so just while Claire makes the breakout rooms, now's a chance for you all to ask any questions to any of our amazing speakers. So you should, if technology goes how we hope, be able to move in between the rooms as you like, and sort of pop in a bit like we're trying to create a fair careers fair vibe as much as we can. So please do jump into as many different rooms as you like. There'll be a One HealthTech student in each of the rooms, and there'll also be some other One HealthTech people popping in and around.